Hey, folks, how are you doing tonight? I'm here with my good friend, Daniel Burke of the Schiller Institute, and we thought we might have a little chat about how crazy world events have been over the last few days. Daniel, why don't you start off with what's been on your mind lately and what's been on the mind of most of us who are concerned about the world?
Okay, so I have a kind of a challenging starting point, which is I want you to learn about an important expose that came out in Newsweek about 12 days ago. It's by a guy named Christensen who works with I forget exactly the name of the organization he works with, Nuclear Information Association of Scientists, something like that, Federation of American Scientists. And he received through FOIA certain documents about what the U.S. war plan is against Russia and China. Like, what are they thinking of doing if we go to war with Russia and China? It refers especially to this thing called global lightning, which is an exercise that took place back in April of last year. Now, what it includes is the idea that NATO and the United States should be prepared to launch a nuclear weapon and then have a nuclear volley return and then be ready to launch another wave of nuclear weapons.
Hmm.
So, like, work that through in your mind about where the people are who are, what are the ideas that are controlling the policies that we're seeing the effects of in this lunacy around Ukraine, around the imminent Russian invasion that has, could happen at any moment. In fact, I think it was supposed to happen about 2 hours ago, according to the Sun, the British tabloid.
Yeah,
But
1 a.m., 1
yeah,
a.m. So,
1 a.m. British time.
yes.
So, so it already happened, and hopefully everything's okay because we're still alive here. But the put in your mind that kind of reality that there is an actual sincere danger of nuclear war. And there's a recent report on this further. I'll just say this, that imagine if a nuclear weapon goes off in Europe, for example, how many people would require medical attention? How many people would die? How completely destructive it would be of all civilized society, of every capability of governments and economies to care for the population. And that's what they're toying with right now. So that's what I think really needs to be considered by everyone.
Sure. Well, I saw Biden today, and I thought it was utterly amazing that with all of the U.S. Spy equipment and all the satellites and all of these things that have all been aimed at the Russia-Ukraine border for the past 3 or 4 weeks during all of this, he's not sure. He can't verify that there are troops moving away from the border. He can't verify it, even though Russia says that troops are moving away from the border and going back to where they normally are. He can't verify it. He's not sure of it. That was utterly shocking to me. That he just can't verify. He doesn't know if they really are. So he's not time to stand down. It's still possible Russia might invade Ukraine, he said. Still possible. That was just ridiculous to me. And then later in the speech today, Biden said that he wanted to make clear that the United States is not trying to destabilize Russia. Now that's funny. Who is Alexander Navalny? And who's backing him and cheering for him for the past few years? And what about Pussy Riot? Do you remember Pussy Riot? Now, didn't Hillary Clinton give them an award? But oh no, the USA isn't trying to destabilize Russia. And who was funding the Chechen separatists all these years? The Islamic radical and extremists in Chechnya for decades. That Putin came to power basically fighting these Chechen extremists. Who was backing them over the years? I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. And who just destabilized Kazakhstan, with the NGOs, and who funded the protests in Belarus right on their border? And why is it that in 2014 the government of Ukraine fell and you have this fanatical government in the eastern regions? I mean, how can he say this? Oh, we're not trying to destabilize Russia. He said NATO is no threat to Russia. But I will say the speech from Biden, it didn't have all the fire I was concerned it might have. It almost looked like so many of the European leaders have said to the United States, can you just knock this off? Can you just, and it's like Biden just can't let this go. But at the same time, he's realizing that if he comes out with all the bluster that some forces would like him to come out with, he'll just completely lose credibility. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I was on the phone with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder of the Schiller Institute, yesterday, and her emphasis is that it's a very complex situation. The situation in the Donbass is extremely significant. It's not clear. Does Zelensky want to invade? I mean, does he want to take over? Right? Does he? Is he being goaded on to do that by Biden? At the same time, he has people in Germany and other European nations that are against that don't want that kind of thing to happen. At the same time, he's got neo-Nazis, very significant, powerful fascist faction in the military who
Yeah.
could overthrow him, for
Yeah, you
example.
can see the story over the weekend that all these newspapers did this, this feel good story about a grandma who's learning to shoot a gun, and she's being taught by the Ukrainian National Guard supposedly to shoot a gun. But in all the photographs, you can see the symbol that soldier teaching the old lady how to shoot her gun is wearing. He has the Nazi symbol, the lightning bolts on his arm. This is a neo-Nazi teaching this old woman how to shoot her gun. And in Germany, they went as far as having to blot that symbol out because it's an illegal symbol. But basically, U.S. media, British media, French media were all running basically a positive, like, slice of life story about neo-Nazis training old women how to fight in Ukraine. I mean, it was
Yeah, they
just
were doing propaganda for the Azov battalion. Yeah.
yeah, and it was, it was exposed, and I mean, they didn't do a very good job covering it up. The guy
No.
was wearing those Nazi symbols on his arm, like it was not a secret. But yet,
Well,
U.S. media, imagine if Donald Trump and one of his supporters had been wearing that symbol, they would have jumped on it immediately. But when it comes to Ukraine, it's just kind of, whatever.
yeah, my friend Marion, she says, not only does the emperor have no clothes, but the emperor has no hypersonic weapons.
Hmm.
That there's a circumstance now where it's quite widely, I think, understood, including from ideologues at, for example, Chatham House in the UK. Other major think tanks like the Atlantic Council are admitting in their documents that there is no longer one hegemonic superpower in the world, being the United States. Their way of describing it, but it's changed. They have to, at least they even have to acknowledge that now they say the U.S. is the leader of global West, whatever the hell that means, right? And global West.
Yeah, I mean, the West is by definition not the entire globe. So
Right, you would think so.
yeah,
But I
but then
mean,
the West itself is this weird construct, right?
absolutely, west of what?
Yeah, exactly. So
Uh,
go on.
but
Yeah.
I mean, my observation here is that the end of history didn't happen. Everyone figured out that history has continued since the 1990s, since the fall of the Soviet Union. Then the phase that we're in right now is extremely difficult for these people to address because Putin's point is so absolutely clear. We have indivisible security needs, and there's nowhere else for us to go. We need now a new security architecture. So that's what I think is sort of, that question is hanging. The question of what is the character of a mutually beneficial relationship between the United States and Russia.
Mhm.
I heard Jackson Hinkle talking with George Galloway about this. And it's very much the point. Like, what is the basis for a new security system? Because right now, the great tension is that there has been no response to the Russian demand for an end to NATO's eastward expansion, and there's been no response to a demand to prevent the continued emplacement of offensive weaponry on the border of Russia, to stop that, to prevent that from going forward, an agreement that this is a natural interest of Russia, and that if we're going to have any kind of agreement between us, it's going to have to include that. And that's been completely ignored. So that's where the danger is coming from.
Very interesting. Now, I recently said that Joe Biden is the starvation president, with his starvation policy in Afghanistan, stealing their money, and, in the middle of a crisis of malnutrition in the country.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, there's a national day of action for Alex Saab, a Venezuelan diplomat who was kidnapped because he was trying to arrange for Iran to export food to Venezuela. And then on top of that, right now, inflation is
Yeah.
destroying the economy of the country right now. I mean, people can't afford to buy basic food items. I mean, prices are rising. The gas prices are through the roof. And he could do what Nixon did and impose price controls. If Biden was serious about helping working families, he could, with the stroke of a pen, sign some like 90-day price controls and get the price of food down. But he's not doing that. However, when he was in the Obama administration, they were the first administration in all of US history to actually cut food stamps and reduce the amount that families get. Joe Biden is the starvation president in my book. I mean, that's what he's all about, is taking foods out of the mouths of children. In Yemen, he's helping the Saudis to starve the
Yeah.
people in Yemen and commit war crimes. It looks to me like the Biden administration is all about using food as a weapon, which is by definition a war crime.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think that's a great way to identify what's going on here. The starvation president. I mean, and the case in Afghanistan really clarifies how that process works, because our reports from Afghanistan, and for example, we had a conference with Dr. Shah Marabi, the former an advisor to the Afghan Central Bank, and Pino Arlaki, who was a negotiator on behalf of the United Nations with the Taliban. And what we have learned is that the problem is not that there's enough food in Afghanistan. The problem is that there's not money. There's no liquidity coming from the central bank because of the frozen funds that are now completely stolen. So the means of committing this kind of economic mass murder is completely financial. And I think it's really crucial for people to take a look at that and begin to consider solutions to this bankrupt hyperinflationary collapse we're in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, will this Russia tension end? That's my
Yeah.
question, because it's been
Yeah.
ready to end about 3 times already. The whole
Mhm.
world, it looks like it's backing down. And then Biden goes, "Oh, can we get this going again? Oh. At first they were saying it was an imminent invasion, and then they changed their minds. And then it wasn't an imminent invasion. And then they had the date, the exact date it was going to happen. And I mean, this is really ridiculous. I mean, at this point, I'm wondering if the Biden administration is going to go down in history like the Jehovah's Witnesses that picked at the exact date of the second coming, and then it didn't happen, and they look kind of stupid. I mean, Biden had the exact date tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day that Ukraine is going to be invaded, and it didn't happen. And then the other thing is, I remember that the Russian foreign ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, she said that Biden is basically, there never was going to be an invasion of Ukraine, but Biden's going to take credit for this. He's going to say, "I
Yeah.
stopped Putin from invading Ukraine." And it sounds like he's already doing that in his speech today. He's like alluding to the fact that he's already
Yeah.
done it. So, I mean,
Diplomacy worked.
yeah, is this is what he can do now? Is he can stop invasions that were never going to happen? What can this guy do? Is he's not going to fix the infrastructure of the country. He was supposed to rescue us from Trump. Remember that?
Oh
Trump,
yeah.
all of the problems, the pandemic, the economic fallout of the pandemic, the rioting, the instability, the divisions in the country, all of that was because of Trump. And now Trump is out of office, and Biden was supposed to save the day. And it's been well over a year, and everything in the country has gotten worse. I can't think of anything in the country that's gotten better. The country is more polarized and more divided. The economy has gotten worse. COVID, there's been more deaths, under Biden than there were under Trump. I mean, I'm not saying Trump was good. I did not vote for Trump. Well, don't get me wrong, right? And Trump, brought us to the brink of World War by murdering Qasem Soleimani. He ripped
Mhm.
up the Iran deal. Donald Trump, had horrendous policies in many ways. But if Biden was supposed to be riding in on a white horse to save us from Trump, I'm not seeing it.
I think okay. I think we just have to begin to get a little bit better, all of us, in understanding how things have changed, because the Russia-China agreement that was announced at the beginning of the Olympics, with Putin and Xi Jinping meeting in person, it is very clear what they're planning to do. It specifically calls for a new relationship on the basis of economic development, and relationship not just between Russia and China, but among nations. And that kind of shift of towards physical economic development, I think it's the only possible way to change the paradigm, to get out of the crisis that we're in, because that's wherein you can begin to imagine a mutually beneficial relationship between the United States and Russia. At least some place where we can collaborate and move forward out of this zone of constant mutually assured destruction. And that's why I think that this policy I've been discussing with you of Operation Ibn Sina becomes something that people can really champion and highlight. Uh, there's a massive crime of genocide being imposed upon Afghanistan, as you pointed out, also in Yemen, also in many other countries, in Syria, vicious crimes committed through the form of sanctions. But this is therefore the place where we really have to focus on defining a positive way forward.
Sure. Now we have a super chat question. Someone said, "Will tension with Russia end?" 100 years says no. Well, I would disagree with that person
Yeah.
because if you look at some rather critical moments in American history, the American Revolution, what side was Russia on? They supported the revolution. American Civil War, the British were supporting the South, but the Russians were supporting Abraham Lincoln and sent their navy to the harbor to protect New York harbors during the war and basically deterred the British from entering the war on the side of the South. And during the Second World War, Russia was aligned with the United States. So I think that there is overlap between the United States and Russia, and I think culturally we aren't that different. Anna Louise Strong is one of my favorite writers. She lived in the Soviet Union in the 1930s, and in her autobiography, I Change Worlds, she's talked about how Americans are known for this motor mindedness, this go get 'em spirit, work hard, achieve your dreams. And in the 1930s, that spirit was dead. People were starving to death, dying on our streets during the Depression. But she said that American spirit, that American dream, that American motor mindedness was alive in the Soviet Union when Stalin was building infrastructure and mobilizing people to go out and build a whole new country and build the world's largest hydroelectric power plant and wipe out illiteracy and electrify this whole country and bringing together all the different nationalities, Ukrainians, Georgians, Moldovans, Lithuanians, Latvians, all together, in one effort to build up and transform the Soviet Union into a country that was strong enough to withstand the Nazi invasion and eventually get into outer space. That was the American spirit in practice. And I would argue that in China now you can find that spirit. A lot of people, I have a friend who's an airport bartender, and before the pandemic, he said he would meet over and over and over again. He would meet Southern American business guy who had just come back from China.
Yes,
and
yes.
say, "Oh my goodness, China is where it's at. They're working hard. They believe in growth there. America needs to be just like China." And it's kind of funny because China is, it's communist. It's the Communist Party that's in charge. But these American conservative businessmen, they would see China as this country that was in line with their values. Why? They still believe in growth in China. Over here, we've been overcome with this pessimism and this belief there's just too many people in the world. We need to reduce the population. There's no point. There's no hope. And in China they don't think that way, and in Russia they don't think that way. And I would disagree with the person who says that we're just bound, by history to be at war with Russia or to be at odds with Russia. What would you say, Daniel?
I totally agree with you. I think that your point on the cultural similarities is really important because, in my view, is that in each of these civilizations, Russian, Chinese, and American, and where we come, what our nation state, what our republic derives from in the European Renaissance. What you have is certain universal ideas that are expressed in a diversity of ways, and this is beautiful and very powerful. And what I see is the extraordinary significance that Xi Jinping is effecting a Confucian revival, a revival of Confucianism, bringing back the most beautiful ideas of Chinese civilization that have this concept of benevolence or ren, or the importance of developing the virtue of the citizenry, and that's the source of wealth and prosperity. There's something that's going on in China in that respect that's not happening here, and we're responsible for changing that.
Now, what do you make of that video that George Soros made, saying that basically that Xi Jinping is reversing everything Deng Xiaoping accomplished, and that Xi Jinping is the most dangerous? Like, what do you make? I guess, of course, we all don't like George Soros. He's a wrecker who's gone around the world destroying economies. The collapse of the Soviet Union, color revolution. But what do you make of his analysis, though? His contrasting of Xi with Deng Xiaoping, like what's that about?
He's like ridiculously exposing his the fact that he's living in the old paradigm. He's in the paradigm of monetarism. I
Mm,
mean, how long did they have this hope that they could force China to go, that opening up China meant opening up, cracking them open and sucking out all the juices, right?
mm.
Which is what they did to Russia in the 1990s, what George Soros, Jeffrey Sachs, and so forth did with shock therapy. So their hope is completely ahistorical and idiotic, and yet they can't deal with it. They can't deal with the fact that they lost.
That's a good
That's,
point. Yeah, and that I mean, I think he might also be alluding to that, during the Cold War, Russia and China were allies at
sure.
first, and then, China and the Soviet Union had their falling out. And for a while, China tried to present itself as being more like revolutionary than the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was, they had detente, they were negotiating, and China was like the banner, the standard bearer of global revolution. But then after a while, China realized they were isolated. And, starting really during Mao's life, it was 1969 is when it really started. China started aligning with the United States. And first, it was done in the name of being ultra revolutionary. They said the Soviet social imperialists are the main danger to the people of the world. And then Nixon went to China. And China supported Pinochet, and China had relations with the Shah of Iran, with Haile Selassie in Ethiopia, and China was starting to pivot into the U.S. camp. And then after Deng Xiaoping came into office in 1976 and ended the Cultural Revolution, and in 1978 with the reform and opening up, I think that there was a feeling that China was basically, I mean, it's true that China was having to make a lot of concessions to the United States in terms of both foreign policy, and they had a lot of free market zones to get that foreign investment and such. And but the Communist Party never stepped down. The Communist Party still ran the country. But China was kind of in a situation where the United States, because the United States was bringing in that foreign money, they had to kind of let the United States, take the lead, take the wheel. And now, Xi Jinping is saying, no, we don't have to let the United States take the wheel anymore.
Hmm.
We've raised millions from poverty. We've built up our economy. We had a
Hmm.
relationship with you, and we'd love to continue having a relationship with you, but we're not going to let you kick us around and tell us what to do. We've built up our own economy. We have our own corporations like Huawei Technologies. We have our own, scientific breakthroughs, our own university system, and we're going to do our own thing. And that's what Soros doesn't particularly care for, right? He liked that Deng Xiaoping, in order to get that foreign investment, made concessions. Xi Jinping is not as completely willing to make these concessions. That's the connection I think he's drawing. Then on top of that, I think Soros is just threatened by ideology. He's threatened by ideological communism. I mean, the Chinese Communist Party, yeah, in the 70s, in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, they did kind of water down their ideology. And Jiang Zemin, I believe, at one point said their goal was to eventually adopt the Western system. But that's not the case anymore. Xi Jinping says, no, we look at, the United States with your school shootings, and your suicide rate and your opioid addiction, and your society that's kind of crumbling and doesn't have basic infrastructure. Maybe we don't want to adopt that system. Maybe we want to continue adjusting our socialist system to be more modern and effective. That's my take on it. But there you go.
Well, it was the early 90s that Soros's agents in China got basically kicked out or otherwise lost all of their power to change these things. Things have shifted.
All right. So the next question, and then we'll do the Monroe Doctrine. But the next question was Russia and China having a new SWIFT system. Could
Hmm.
Cuba and North Korea benefit? Right? Because that's the threat, is to throw Russia out of SWIFT. What do you
Yeah.
make of that?
I think that this is a good place to look at the fundamental tension because there have been some significant warnings. I think I even brought it up last time. I think that the former head of the CDU came out in Germany and said that if Russia is booted out of the SWIFT system, we might have a total crash of the financial system. Uh,
Thank you.
yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. Do you know how many businesses, trade with Russia? And if you don't
Yeah.
have the SWIFT system, I mean, there's no bank transfers with Russia, no bank transfers. That's going to destroy the economy of Germany. That's going to destroy the economy of France, Norway, Sweden. A lot of those countries, they import a lot of stuff, not just natural gas, a lot of stuff from Russia, and vice versa. Russia buys a lot of stuff from them, agricultural products, imports. And yeah, I mean, if suddenly you can't do bank transactions with Russia, that's going to wreck Europe's economy. It would hurt the United States. It would basically, there'd be no more Brighton Beach here in New York. You go to Brighton Beach, it's all Russian stores, Russian businesses. There'd be no more Brighton Beach if they kicked Russia out of the SWIFT system. It's a pretty extreme threat, but if they carry it out, I think it would come back to bite the United States in the long term.
Can I just respond to that? I mean, Russia and China got together and they announced that they're preparing for the nuclear option,
Mhm.
because it's so obvious that everything has been massive economic warfare against Russia and China. And I think that if you think about the fact that they're trying to put themselves into a negotiating position,
Mhm.
right? Because what you said is true, and I think it's even far worse than that. I think that the whole derivatives bubble is liable to blow out.
Mm.
Uh, Similarly, there's a guy named Eric Zeus who's done an article claiming that that's really the function of what Putin has done in putting the troops on the border. That it was never intended to invade anyone, but it wanted to be a demonstration of what's actually at risk here, what's actually at issue here, because we do need the new security architecture. So this whole thing goes together. You need a new security architecture, which is a new financial architecture. You can't have both, one without the other, because you need to have the focus on actually having a policy of lifting up nations as opposed to this constant, crushing of them.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, we're in agreement on that. Now, someone asked us to debate the Monroe Doctrine. Do we disagree about that? I mean, I do.
I know.
Somebody with some inside knowledge or something. That's
Yeah.
not something I know about. I mean, the Monroe Doctrine is right. The idea the United States engages in regime change throughout South and Central America, and right, is that what it is, or no, or I don't know.
Let's move on.
Okay, move on. But anyway, but yeah, but I mean, if Russia and China develop a new SWIFT system, um, that would result in basically opening up an international banking system to Cuba and North Korea and to a lot of countries the USA has sanctioned. And my question is, I mean, I kind of feel like eventually this is going to happen, not just with banking, but with social media. There's going to be alternative social media outlets from Russia and China. I mean, we've already got Yandex. Yandex is a much better search engine than Google. Google gives you an answer that is, based on advertising revenue and what they want you to see. Yandex just helps you find what you're looking for.
Hmm.
And I think that, yeah, we're going to have social media outlets that are from Russia and China. That yeah, they are going to make themselves very clearly a part of the globe. They're already building a new Hollywood in China. The Oriental Film Metropolis, it's called. And they're building it, right. And they want to become the new Hollywood. So, I mean, the world is going to move to a multipolar direction. It's not just going to stay centered around the United States forever. That's just not going to happen. So there you go. I mean, that's my thoughts.
Well, I'll make one more point on this. I mean, on the relationship between the war threat and the financial system.
Yeah.
You know, where Stoltenberg has been one of the most vicious Russia hawks, the present or soon to be no longer head of NATO, chief of NATO.
Yeah.
And where's he going next? He's just been announced to become the chief central bank officer in Norway.
Hmm.
That's what's going on. On the other side, it was two representatives of the Bank for International Settlements who came out in the past week, a guy named Ditus and a guy, I'm sorry, I don't have his name in front of me. It's a French name I don't have memorized, who came out and said France should leave NATO. France needs to leave NATO, that France needs to take a role in preventing the sleepwalkers from bringing us into nuclear war.
Hmm.
So there is a kind of a recognition that something has to change about the whole system. And I think that it's not sufficient to say that we're going to split into two systems. I don't think that's going to happen, because the consequence is that the Western financial system just goes through total blowout. And I mean, that's happening anyway. That's my point, is that you need to actually reorganize it. And that includes Russia and China. If somehow you don't, then I think it's almost impossible to avoid war.
Ah, wow. Well, there you go. Now, do you think November is going to be good for the Republicans? Because it looks that way to me. I just don't see the Biden administration doing a very good job. I think that there's going to be a sweep by the Republicans in November. But I mean, we're still 10 months out, right? I mean, there's no guarantee. Things could change very dramatically. But what do you think?
The U.S. is becoming ungovernable. The hyperinflation is not going to go away until we have a dramatic shift in policy. So whoever could wake up and figure out how to accomplish that, they might be able to do some damage. But in the meanwhile, it's completely controlled. So even if the Republicans take, like, does it mean anything if the fundamental policies are the same?
Okay. That's a very, very, very fair point. Now, here's a question. I have no idea what they're talking about. Philosophical question for Daniel. Do LaRouchites believe in Leibniz monadology?
Monadology.
Yeah. Is this a form of idealism?
Okay, well, I reject the presumptions about idealism and materialism that are inherent in the way most people talk about it. So I read LaRouche if you want to, or read the monadology. I mean, I don't know. This is kind of a silly question. If you want to learn about these things, then go and read them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good answer. Yeah. There's a lot of jokers in the chat tonight, and we can just
Good.
yeah, it's okay. I mean, people have their thing. There's probably somebody sitting there who really wants to hear that, but I mean, we're just not going to go there tonight. But there you go. Is there any other points you want to make tonight, Daniel, before we say goodnight?
Well, I really appreciate the continuing conversations, and I am really very much looking forward to your event on March 12th.
Yes, you're going to be there, and I will be there, and Jackson Hinkle will be there, and Haas will be there, and Samira Khan will be there, and Peter Coffin and Miss Astronaut Cowboy will be there. It's going to be quite an event, right? I mean, I keep every day I hear of another person who's going to be there. I'm worried the hall won't be big enough. That's my concern right now. So I mean, Keaton is there, and he just had his great AOC. That was absolutely tremendous, and yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a great event. I'm glad you're going to be there. Say some remarks as well as some others. It's going to be good. Yeah, March 12th.
It bodes well for the future of the nation that there are people coming together in such a way, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for doing that. And I mean, I would ask people to kind of figure this out. Figure out if you can come, you should come, but figure out what are the necessary steps for the next phase, because we're clearly entering into a different phase in American politics too, which is typified by this event. That's my view.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been fun, and thank you, Daniel, for coming on late at night. I know you have an early morning job, so thank you for coming on and taking care of things. You got a family to take care of and everything. So yeah, and we'll have you back. You'll be back on probably in 2 weeks. We'll do another one of these and talk about world affairs and the economy, etc. So, all right, everybody. Best wishes and good night.